Hi everybody, welcome to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about the Pfizer vaccine. In case you missed it, last week I did a 20-minute overview of the vaccine situation in the US as a whole, like how we got from nothing to where we're at. And where I left off was that Pfizer had concluded its hearing for EUA approval, which EUA in this case is Emergency Use Authorization. Over the weekend it was approved and it started to ship out, and then we started getting inoculated on Monday. And so what I wanted to do is do a deeper dive just into the Pfizer vaccine itself, and then later on I'll do a similar video for anything that's pending approval, which the only one on the horizon is Moderna. So to jump right into it, so the Pfizer vaccine isn't just the Pfizer vaccine, it's actually a partnership between Pfizer and BioNTech to produce an mRNA vaccine, which again, we talked about the mRNA piece last week. But Pfizer has been developing the actual vaccine portion, and BioNTech is the owner of the mRNA technology in this case. And so what they've done is they've created the vaccine with the very straightforward name of BNT 162B2. So that's the one that's being administered. It's the one that went through for approval and everything. And so the vaccine as it stands right now is being manufactured in Michigan with no preservatives whatsoever, and that means it has to be kept very, very cold through all of the distribution. It adds a lot of headaches to the distribution, but at the same time we're getting a vaccine that doesn't have preservatives. And more often than not, when people talk about vaccines being evil, no good, very bad things, they're usually talking about the preservatives. So this one is clean from that perspective. There are situations where it can get too cold apparently and ruin the batches. I know Alabama and another state had issues with that this past week, and obviously if it gets too hot, it goes bad in general. And like I said before, this is an mRNA, so there's no actual live antigens in the vaccine. It's all amino acids that trick your cells basically into producing shock proteins that make your cells look like the COVID vaccine, and then your body attacks it and builds the immunization that way. So this is a new technology for vaccines, not such a new technology overall because it's been used in cancer treatment for quite a while now. So there's a lot of people looking at it to see how effective it's going to be. The U.S. has acquired, through sponsorship from Operation Warp Speed, 100 million doses from Pfizer, and we'll get more into the details later as far as like what's rolled out, what we can expect from a timeline perspective and things like that. But we have 100 million bought and paid for, and we had an option for 500 million more. We've turned down that option, so now we're just going into a normal queue. The big bottleneck right now as far as distribution goes is how fast it can be manufactured, and not just that, but who is getting the doses to begin with. So the UK started administering it last week. Canada had already approved it last week, and then now we've approved it and started shipping it out. So there's 3 major players at least who are expecting, large shipments of this particular vaccine. And I don't really know how the immediate distribution works because we're guaranteed 100 million doses. But I don't think I still don't think that's a first come, first serve. I think they have to rotate some of the distribution based off of their commitments. So the trial, like going back into the trial stages, they had 4 different drugs that they were trying. They did a small, like a very small first test group, a medium-sized second test group, and then for the final test group for this particular BNT 162B2, it was 44,000 people. So they went through a lot of folks, and this is a 2-dose drug, just like most of the mRNA vaccines are going to be. So you'll get one intramuscular injection, and then 3 weeks later you'll get your second. So the 3 is it's the exact same thing. It just has a stronger effect the second time around. And so what they've come to determine is that the first injection is effective for 50% of the folks, and the second injection is way more potent, like I said. So up to 2 months out from the second injection, you have 85% inoculation. And so you may see a number that says 95% is what they're getting on this drug, and that's not quite true. The 95% is measured off of 7 days after the second dose, and then the 2 months after the second dose it dropped 10% to the 85-ish%. So there are some side effects that come with this, but they're not side effects that are completely unknown to us. Everything seems to fit in line with what we were expecting. And so I'll put a list up of all the things, but I'll also run through them. So injection site reactions, meaning irritation and whatnot, in 84% of folks. 62% of folks get fatigue, 55% headaches, 38% muscle pain, 31% chills, 23% joint pains, 14% fever. And then the severe reactions are less than 5%. And I'll go into that a little bit more detail in just a second. But all of those previous side effects are pretty common because your body is having an immune response to what it thinks, at least, is a virus. And so your body's just going to have all of these things come along with your body using a lot of its resources to fight an infection, or a virus in this case. And so it's pretty common. And so the severe reactions, however, are a little bit more, they're not intuitive, because it appears that if you're above 55, only 2.6% of the people in the entire 44,000 population or sample size had severe reactions. And this is stuff like allergic reactions or things that could potentially be fatal. In the most cases, it's just it'd be just an allergic reaction to one of the ingredients that wasn't known beforehand. And in these trials, there were staff like on call or right there when it was administered to make sure that everybody was fine. And then, the weird piece is that if you're between 16 and 55, there's a 5%, or specifically it's 4.6% chance for a severe reaction. And then I guess I was a little bit incorrect before. So the serious adverse reactions are less than 0.5%, and so I guess that would be the more fatal type things. So the chances of you being bedridden for a day or just out sick for a day, pretty high, in relation to the chances that you're sidelined for multiple days, because that's actually very low. The negative about this whole thing is that there's no long-term impacts that are being studied, because there's no long-term at this point. And so they had the clinical group, which is, I think, 90 days out at this point, and they're continuing to measure that group. And if anything comes up, I'm sure we'll see. But as of right now, there's only this stuff at the beginning, your initial reactions to it. And so far, it's safe enough when you compare it to other vaccines and how your body reacts to those vaccines. And then I also mentioned the effectiveness, and so not everybody that gets this is going to be completely inoculated, meaning that there's still a chance you could catch it afterwards. The chances are just greatly diminished in a way that as a population as a whole, we're way better off. And that's where we're getting, like, with this type of inoculation, we're also getting into the potential for herd immunity. So if enough people are immune to it, then we can start to live our normal lives, even if the drug isn't 100% effective. So the UK, like I mentioned earlier, started last week. There was a couple of problems. I mean, everybody who takes it and has an adverse reaction, like a severe reaction, we're going to hear about it. And it happened a couple of times in the UK last week. And so far this week, it's happened once. I believe it was a nurse in Juneau, Alaska, had to be hospitalized after taking it. But they gave her epinephrine and a few other things to kind of help out with the allergic reaction, and she's fine. Everything's stabilized. There's no long-term effects, or there's no continued effects in the shorter time frame that they've noticed. And so that's a positive in and of itself. And so I feel like we're not taking this first, but it's still early enough to where we may start to see things before the UK does, if there's things to be seen. But at this point, there doesn't appear to be any issues with that type of stuff. So on a side note, I'll also include a description, or not a description, a link down below that includes or that takes you to a PDF of what was submitted to the FDA for EUA approval. In that is a breakdown of all the side effects and how they're calculated. It also has a breakdown of the active ingredients, and so you can go look at that. It's all super long names, and I have no idea what it is, and so I didn't figure it was worth bringing up on here. But if you do have a medicine allergy, I highly recommend looking at that list and then getting with your physician to see if it's something that you should do or not, based off of your own personal health. And so that gets us to kind of where we're at right now. So this week they distributed 3 million doses, and they had 6 million available, but what the FDA decided to do was hold the other 3 million in reserve for the second dose that's being provided this week. So there was a couple of different ways they could approach it. They could say we'll get 6 million people inoculated, and then 3 weeks later we'll get another 6 million to provide to these same people. I feel like they made the more conservative, in this case, a correct approach, because now they know that the people who've gotten the inoculation or the round one of the inoculation will have, like, it's dedicated to them. They'll have those doses ready at 21 days, and they'll be able to complete their inoculation. Whereas if some unforeseen event happens and they lose a batch or something goes wrong, then you've wasted 3 million or 6 million doses in not being able to follow up with them. And so I feel like that's the correct way to approach it. That does bring up the bottleneck. And so right now the bottleneck is manufacturing. And it's not just manufacturing the vaccine for the US, it's manufacturing the vaccine for the US, the UK, and Canada, because Canada approved last week as well the use of this vaccine. So all in all, I would say that we're off to a good start. There's nothing tricky about the vaccine, but like I said, it does have its drawbacks in that we don't know the long-term efficacy of the drug, and we don't know the long-term potential impacts of the drug. The panel, the FDA panel that was issuing the EUA licensure last week had several recommendations, and so if you are pregnant, don't take it. If you're under 16, I don't think you're going to be able to take it. And they're going back to the clinical trial groups and then starting new trials to determine whether those things, whether it's safe for the young folks or for pregnant folks. And so there'll be more news about that to come out in the future, but as of right now, those two groups are excluded. From a timeline perspective, and if we were solely relying on Pfizer, it would be many, many months before the vaccine is available to the general population, because we've got phase 1A, B, and C to go through, and we bought 50 million total doses, or we bought 100 million total doses that work on 50 million people, because everybody's got to have 2 doses. And in phase 1A, which is just healthcare and long-term care facilities, there's 24 million people in that. So we'll not have enough to get through the initial phase just with this initial 100 million rollout. But if you inject Moderna in there at some point, like we may have a much quicker rollout of vaccines in general. And one thing that I don't know as of yet is if we will have choices. So if we'd rather have the Moderna, do we have the option to take it versus the Pfizer, or vice versa, or how all that works? But as soon as I find out more about that, I'll let you guys know in future videos. I think that's it. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to ask in the comments. And again, check out that link to the report paper provided to the FDA by Pfizer and BioNTech, because there's tons of data in there if you like data. And there's tons more just specific information that's too detailed to put in a short overview video. But you guys have a good week, and I'll talk to you next time.